He was the most powerful man in the empire. Not the emperor, not the generals, not the nobles with their fancy titles and their ancient bloodlines. Him, Li Sheng, the chancellor, the man who had spent 5 years quietly holding an entire kingdom together with his bare hands. And nobody, not even the emperor, fully understood how much they needed him. Until the day they decided they didn't. This is that story. And trust me, you want to hear how it ends. Let me take you back to the beginning. 5 years ago, Li Sheng arrived in this world with nothing. No name anyone recognized. No family connections. No favors to call in. Just himself, and a mind that was centuries ahead of everyone around him. In a world where the imperial court ran on who you knew, what family you came from, and how deep you were willing to bow, Li Sheng was an outsider. A nobody. A man who had no business climbing anywhere near the top. And yet, within 5 years, he was the chancellor of the entire empire. Not because someone handed it to him, because he earned every single step. When Emperor Shao Ming came to power, the empire was a mess. The noble clans had their fingers in everything. The courts, the grain supplies, the military appointments, the tax records. Corruption ran so deep that officials didn't even bother hiding it anymore. The people were hungry. The borders were leaking. And the young emperor was sitting on a throne that felt more like a trap than a seat of power. It was Li Sheng who fixed it. All of it. He dismantled the clans one by one, cutting off their influence like dead branches. He rewrote the tax laws. He cleared out the corrupt officials who had been bleeding the treasury dry for decades. He reorganized the grain reserves so that when drought hit the northern provinces, the people didn't starve. He secured the borders. He cleaned up the courts. He turned a crumbling, rotting government into something that actually worked. And through all of it, he and Emperor Shao Ming were like brothers. Two men building something great together. The emperor would tell people, Li Sheng is my right hand. Without him, I am nothing. He even said it under oath. At Beima Temple, standing on the stone steps with his hand gripping Li Sheng's, he looked him in the eyes and said, as long as I live, I will never betray you. Those words. He actually said those words. So here is the question that's probably already forming in your mind. If Li Sheng did all of that, if he built the empire, fixed the courts, saved the people, and stood beside this emperor through everything, then why, 5 years later, is he standing in the middle of the Great Hall watching 3 senior ministers kneel before the throne and demand his removal? The answer is one of the oldest stories in the history of power. He became too good, not corrupt, not dangerous, not disloyal, just too capable, too brilliant, too indispensable. And somewhere along the way, Emperor Shao Ming stopped seeing Li Sheng as his partner and started seeing him as a mirror that made him feel small. When a man of ordinary talent stands next to a man of extraordinary talent every single day, one of two things happens. Either he grows because of it, or he starts to resent it. Emperor Shao Ming had chosen the second path, and now, standing in the imperial Great Hall, surrounded by marble floors and golden pillars and the weight of 100 watching eyes, he was reading out a decree. His voice was carefully arranged to sound reluctant, sympathetic, even. The performance of a man who has been forced into something against his will. Li Sheng, he said, you know this puts me in a difficult position. The court speaks with one voice. I have no choice. From this day forward, your title as chancellor is hereby revoked. He paused. You are reassigned as city governor of the capital. The hall went completely silent. Every minister, every official, every guard and servant in that enormous room held their breath and turned to look at Li Sheng. Li Sheng stood perfectly still in the center of the hall. He didn't flinch. He didn't go pale. He didn't open his mouth to protest. He just stood there, and for a moment you might have thought he hadn't heard. But he had heard. He understood everything. He understood that this had been coming for a while. He understood that the 3 ministers on their knees weren't acting on principle, they were acting on fear. Fear that his reforms would keep stripping away their power. Fear that as long as Li Sheng stood beside the emperor, they would never be safe. He understood that Emperor Shao Ming hadn't been forced into anything. He had chosen this. Had probably been planning it quietly for months, waiting for the right moment, the right group of ministers willing to take the public blame so the emperor could keep his hands clean. He let his eyes drift briefly to the woman standing beside the throne. Princess Xiao Shui, his fiancée, elegant and still as carved stone, her face showing nothing at all. She met his gaze for exactly 1 second. Then she looked away. And that was when Li Sheng made his decision. He walked slowly to the center of the hall. He reached up and removed his chancellor's hat. He set it gently on the stone step in front of him. Then he took off his chancellor's robe, the robe he had worn for 5 years, the robe that marked his rank and his authority and every sacrifice he had made to earn it, and he folded it, slowly, neatly, like a man packing for a journey he has been looking forward to. He bowed low. Your Majesty, I am deeply grateful for your trust over these many years. However, I'm afraid my health has been declining, and I no longer have the strength to serve the court as it deserves. As your decree falls on this fortunate day, I take this opportunity to resign my post entirely and return to my home village. I thank you for everything, and I wish you and the empire well. The silence that followed was a different kind of silence. Before, the room had been quiet with anticipation. Now it was quiet with something closer to panic. Because the emperor had not planned for this. He had planned to humiliate Li Sheng, to strip him of his title and watch him swallow the demotion and accept the lesser role, grateful to still have a seat at the table. That was the plan. The chancellor gets knocked down a peg, the ministers are satisfied, and the emperor gets to feel like the one in charge again. Simple, clean. Everyone goes home. What he had not planned, what nobody in that room had planned, was for Li Sheng to quit. And every official standing in that hall was now doing the same quiet, terrified calculation. The reforms Li Sheng had started were still in progress. The noble clans hadn't been completely dismantled yet. The new systems he'd built still needed someone to run them. Someone who understood how all the pieces connected, who had the skill and the authority to hold it together. Without Li Sheng, who was going to do that? They looked around at each other. Nobody had an answer. Emperor Shao Ming's composure cracked just slightly. Li Sheng, he said. Are you serious? Completely, Your Majesty. Li Sheng looked up at him. Calm, clear. No anger, no bitterness, nothing that could be used against him. These years serving the throne have been the greatest honor of my life. I thank all the honorable ministers for their cooperation. I wish you all good health. A beat of silence. From this day forward, we will not meet again. He bowed, turned, and began walking toward the great doors. The emperor's voice split the silence like a whip. Li Sheng, if you walk through those doors, do not ever come back. He kept walking. From this day forward we are strangers. No bond, no connection, nothing. Princess Xiao Shui spoke then, her voice cool and precise as a blade. Li Sheng, if you leave, our engagement is over. He stopped at the threshold. He turned one final time and looked at her across the length of the hall. As the princess wishes, he said quietly. I should never have reached this high to begin with. This is better for both of us. A pause so small most people probably missed it. Farewell. And then he was gone. The snow was falling outside. Li Sheng stood in the open courtyard and watched white flakes drift down from a gray sky and land on his open palm, one by one, melting the moment they touched his skin. 5 years. Everything he had built. Everything he had given. All of it, handed back with a decree and a cold look from a woman who had chosen her brother's pride over her own heart. He stood there for a long moment, and then he laughed. Not the kind of laugh that tries to hide tears. Not the strained, broken sound of a man pretending he's fine. A real laugh. A full, wide-open laugh. The kind that rises from somewhere deep in your chest when you realize that a door you've been standing behind for years has suddenly swung wide open. He looked down at the snow in his hand. They think they've punished me, he said to nobody. They have absolutely no idea what they've just done. Back inside the palace, Emperor Shao Ming was in full fury. Strip him of his noble title. Take back the mansion. Cancel every privilege. Cancel the engagement. I want it done today. He pulled his robes around him like armor. He thinks he can walk away from me? Let him walk. He'll be back on his knees within the week. General Zhao Hui stood near the throne doing his best to look neutral and failing. He had wanted Li Sheng gone for a long time. Not because of politics. Because of Princess Xiao Shui. He had been quietly obsessed with her for years, and Li Sheng's engagement had been a wall he couldn't get around. With the Chancellor gone, that wall was gone too. He allowed himself a small, private smile. Princess Xiao Shui watched all of it with a face like still water, and said nothing. Out in the city, the officials sent to seize Li Sheng's estate found a scene that unsettled every single one of them, though none of them said it out loud. The servants were gone. Every last one of them, dismissed with kindness and paid a sum generous enough to set most of them up for a year. The rooms were exactly as they'd always been. Nothing had been taken. Nothing had been damaged. No mess, no chaos, no sign of a man who had just lost everything. Just an empty house, quietly waiting to be handed back. Except for the study wall. Lord Chen, the treasury minister, was the one who found it. He stood in the doorway and read the 2 lines written there in bold, dark ink, and he felt something cold move through him that had nothing to do with the winter air. Beware the wolf you invite behind your gates. Once full, he turns and bites the hand that fed him. He stared at those words for a long time. Then he carefully rolled up a copy and walked quickly to the palace. Emperor Shao Ming read the lines, let out a short, contemptuous laugh, and threw the paper away. He's throwing a tantrum. He'll be back within the week. 2 weeks passed. Li Sheng did not come back. In the training courtyard of the military estate, Princess Xiao Shui swung her sword so hard the blade shattered in her hands. She stared at the broken pieces on the ground. Her old master, Elder Wei, appeared from the shadows the way he always did, silently, as if he'd been there the whole time and was only now allowing himself to be noticed. Your heart is unsteady, he said. Something is eating at you. She threw down the hilt. I don't understand him, she said, and for the first time there was something in her voice that wasn't cold. My brother only asked him to take one step back. Just one. He could have kept his influence, his reputation, everything that mattered. All he had to do was bow his head once and accept the demotion. Why couldn't he just do that? Elder Wei was quiet for a moment. From where you're standing, that seems like a reasonable thing to ask, he said finally. But think about who Li Sheng is. Think about what the empire looked like when your brother came to power. The corruption, the clans, the hungry people, the broken courts. Think about who fixed all of that. She said nothing. Was it your brother? Silence. A man who built all of that, who gave everything he had to a cause that wasn't even his own, who never once used his position to enrich himself or build a faction or play politics. When you ask a man like that to bow his head and pretend to be less than he is, you are not asking him to be humble. You are asking him to lie. And some people, Elder Wei said quietly, simply cannot do that. Not because they're proud. Because they know exactly what it cost them to become who they are. Princess Xiao Shui sat down slowly. Did we do something wrong? She asked. And it was a real question, the kind you only ask when you already suspect the answer. You did several things wrong, Elder Wei said. And now you have a problem much larger than a bruised chancellor. The news of Li Sheng's dismissal has already spread across every border. Foreign courts are not stupid. A man of his ability, with no loyalty left to the throne, that is the most valuable asset any rival kingdom could dream of acquiring. There are rulers out there right now drafting their invitations. The color left her face. If he joins another kingdom. If he joins another kingdom, Elder Wei said, this empire will spend the next 10 years paying for the mistake your brother made in a single afternoon. She was already moving. Go, Elder Wei said. But be honest with yourself about one thing first. A man with that kind of pride does not turn back. If you go to him now, you are not going to retrieve a loyal minister. You are going to be too late. He looked at her steadily. You have two choices left. Bring him back by force and imprison him for life so he can never be used against you. Or make sure he never has the chance to be used at all. The sentence hung in the cold air between them. Think carefully, Elder Wei said, and then go tell your brother. Meanwhile, Li Sheng was already riding. He rode north, past the last watchtower, past the last farmhouse, past the last trace of the empire that had just thrown him away, into the open steppe, where the sky was enormous and the wind came from everywhere at once and there were no courts, no decrees, no thrones, and no oaths that anyone was keeping. The northern borderlands. For generations, the empire had feared this place. The frontier tribes were some of the most formidable fighters in the known world. Fast, brutal, masters of the open terrain where the imperial infantry struggled to follow. But they were fractured. Dozens of tribes, each with their own chief, their own feuds, their own reasons to distrust every other tribe around them. What they had never had was someone who could see the whole board. Li Sheng rode into the camp of the largest tribe alone, on a gray horse, with no weapons and no escort, wearing ordinary clothes that said nothing about who he was. The warriors raised their spears. He didn't move. The tribal chief stepped forward. Her name was Kara, and she had held her people together through 3 brutal winters by being harder and sharper than anything the winters threw at her. She looked at this lone stranger who had ridden into her camp like he owned it, and she tilted her head. You come alone, she said. Either you are the bravest man I've ever seen, or you don't understand the situation. Neither, Li Sheng said. I'm the most useful. And then he started talking. He laid out everything. The empire's supply chain vulnerabilities. The names of every corrupt border official who had been skimming the tribute payments that were meant for the tribes. The political fractures inside the imperial court. The weaknesses in the border defenses. The information it would have taken Kara's scouts years to piece together. He handed it to her in one afternoon, clearly and completely, holding nothing back. And then he made her an offer. Not submission. Not alliance with conditions. Not tribute disguised as friendship. Partnership. Real partnership. Between equals. He told her what he could build. Courts and records. Trade routes and agreements. A system of governance so that what they built together would survive them both. Not an empire that swallowed her people. A civilization that included them. Kara listened to all of it without interrupting. Then she looked at him for a long moment. Why? She asked. Why would you do any of this for us? You were the chancellor of the most powerful empire on the continent. You could go anywhere. Any kingdom would take you. Why come here? Li Sheng looked out across the open steppe. The wind moved through the long grass in slow, rolling waves like the land itself was breathing. Because here, he said, no one can tell me to bow my head. Word reached the palace on a gray morning, delivered by a rider who had pushed his horse to its limits to get there. Li Sheng was in the borderlands. He had made contact with Kara's tribe. He was already being listened to, already building something. Emperor Shao Ming's hand tightened around the scroll until the paper crumpled. He turned to General Zhao Hui. Take 3,000 soldiers. Go north. Bring him back in chains, or don't bring him back at all. General Zhao Hui accepted the order with a kind of confidence that comes from never having faced something you couldn't handle. He rode north with his army, certain that intercepting one unarmed former official on the open steppe was going to be the simplest assignment of his career. He found Li Sheng in a wide, flat valley, standing in the snow, alone, still, waiting, almost, as if he'd known they were coming. Zhao Hui halted his troops and looked down at him from horseback. Li Sheng, by order of Emperor Shao Ming, you are commanded to return to the capital and face the consequences of your treachery. The valley was very quiet. Li Sheng looked up at him. Then he let his eyes move slowly across the 3,000 soldiers assembled in the snow. Then he looked back at Zhao Hui. General, he said calmly, before you give your next order, let me ask you something. Have you ever made a decision that you couldn't take back? Zhao Hui drew his sword and gave the signal to advance. He never saw the 10,000 tribal riders come over the ridge. The thunder of hooves hit before anyone had time to react. Kara's warriors came down from 3 directions at once, fast and disciplined, cutting off every route of retreat before the imperial soldiers even understood what was happening. The battle was over in less than an hour. Zhao Hui was captured alive. He would spend a long time thinking about that valley, about the question he hadn't answered, about the decision he couldn't take back. By the time spring arrived, the story had spread to every corner of the empire and beyond. Li Sheng had not fled, had not hidden, had not begged his way into some foreign court's service. He had gone to the one place nobody expected, done the one thing nobody thought possible, and built something entirely new from the ground up, in a single season. He married Kara, not as a political gesture, as a genuine partnership between 2 people who understood exactly what they were building and why it needed to last. Their union brought 3 rival frontier tribes together under one banner, and gave those tribes something they had never had in all their history. A government, real courts, written agreements, roads, a way of doing things that would survive beyond any single leader's lifetime. Not a conquest, a civilization. And then, when it was done, when the structures were in place and the people were settled and the thing he had built was strong enough to stand on its own, Li Sheng sat down and wrote one final message to the man who had thrown him away. He sent it south by a single rider. No army, no threat. Just a piece of paper with a few short lines on it. When Emperor Shao Ming read those lines, the room went very quiet. I asked for nothing. You gave me everything I needed to begin. For that, I thank you. Take care of what we built. I no longer have any need of it. The emperor sat for a long time in his empty throne room. Outside, in the city, things were already beginning to slip. The reform work Li Sheng had started was stalling without someone to drive it forward. The noble clans, sensing the absence of the only man who had ever truly threatened them, were beginning to move again. The corrupt officials who had kept their heads down for 5 years were straightening up and looking around. The grain reserves needed managing. The border agreements needed renewing. The courts needed someone who actually understood how they worked. And to the north, beyond the last watchtower, a new power was taking shape. Something organized and capable, and led by the one man in the world who understood both sides of that border better than anyone alive. Emperor Shao Ming had wanted to make Li Sheng feel small. Instead, he had handed him a blank page and told him to leave. And Li Sheng, being Li Sheng, had written something extraordinary on it. They say the worst mistake any ruler can make is to take a great man and give him a reason to stop being loyal. Because loyalty is a choice. It is made and remade every single day. And when you take everything from a man who has given you everything, his time, his talent, his years, his absolute best, and you treat it like it was nothing, you don't break him. You free him. And a freed man with nothing left to lose and everything left to prove is not a subject anymore. He is something far more dangerous. Li Sheng stood on a hill north of the border on a clear morning, looking south toward the empire he had built and left behind. The wind came in across the steppe, cold and clean and smelling like open space. He had a kingdom at his back. A partner beside him. A future ahead of him that no emperor could touch. He had asked for none of this. They had given it to him anyway. He turned away from the south, and he didn't look back.